Hey everybody, Chairman here with another Kaguya deck profile, and joining me today is a very special guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Christian. Usually on Discord as SalaDNB, and also part of Strictly Broken. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, how this came about is I was doing my Kaguya tier list video, and obviously I tried to include as many decks as I could, but there were some decks that were going to be left out. But I asked in the comments and asked around Discord, hey, if there's any decks that I've missed, please let me know. And Christian basically immediately was just like, "Where's Choice Door? Where's Choice Store?" And I was just like, what Choice Store? Like, I didn't know this was played. And so that very day, we actually played a few games where he showed off his Choice Store list and said, like, yeah, here's why this deck is good. We played a few games, and I was like, wow, this deck looks really good. I would have never expected this deck to work very well. And so obviously, I didn't want to cover every single deck list, but this deck actually impressed me enough to the point where I really wanted to talk about it. So I think one of the things that I didn't understand at first was the advantages of playing Choice Door over something like Choice Standby. So, what do you feel like are the advantages that this deck brings, and
You
like why would you
you
play
mean
this basically?
you mean door standby, right?
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, I meant Choice Standby.
Yeah.
Yeah, Choice.
Yeah.
What is Choice Standby? Yeah.
Interesting deck idea. No. The main advantages you have over the standby list is mill, and you actually can set up for the level 3 Kaguya a lot better in this deck than in the standby deck. Because in the standby deck, it's like, because you're trying to build a board towards level 3, it's really easy for the opponent to tank their board the turn before you set up for your finisher. Since you already have an established board and it's like really easy to crash into it, and then you're gonna struggle with having a good finishing turn to like close out the game. Whereas this deck can like really try to either start crashing earlier or like just play really weak cards that are really hard to crash into to be able to set up the finisher better. It searches and salvages a lot more than the standby deck because you have like 8 triggers that grab a card from bin and you brainstorm a lot with this deck, whereas the standby deck usually relies a lot on just like resonating and like finding cards off the top and then drop searching a couple times throughout the game. So you can fix your hand a lot better towards like a triple finisher turn compared to like the regular list. And yeah, that's like the main advantages, I think.
Right. So when I play normal Standby Kaguya, I'm not really looking for a triple finisher turn because it's a lot, like you said, it's a lot more difficult to do. But it sounds like with this deck, that's the main goal of the deck that you're trying to set up for triple Kaguya every time if you can.
Yeah, basically. This is like very much a deck that's built to accommodate that 3-2 Kaguya is a strong card, and how do we maximize like resolving 3 of this every game?
All right, that sounds great. Well, let's just get straight into the deck. We can just go over the list and just talk about the cards. So first in your deck, we have 4 copies of the K Runner, 4 copies of the Chikariki, and 3 copies of the Hayasaka level 0 drop search. I feel like this is pretty standard for most Kaguya decks, but is there anything that you want to comment about these?
Not really. Yeah, I think this is like very standard for most Kaguya decks that play the Kaguya level 3. And I think like these 3 cards and also the Kage level 3 are like for me the main power cards of the set. Like these are the cards why you're playing this. This is where like a lot of the power of the set lies.
All right, moving on, we have 4 copies of the 00 Chika that bonds to the event, and I guess also 4 copies of the event as well.
Yeah, this is just basically your mill engine, fixes your deck, fixes your hand. One of the better discard outs. There's actually not like the greatest discard outs in Kaguya apart from the drop search. But yeah, it's mostly there for the controlled mill. And like using the event throughout the game, it just comes up a lot where you can, if in bad games, for example, you miss the climax, you can use the event to like open up slots to let your zeros attack profitably. Like using the stock swap twin driver to attack into an open lane you forced open with this event is usually really good.
Speaking of the stock swap twin drive, you run 2 copies of this.
I think most decks are either going to run 1 or 2 copies of this. I run 2 because it's a decent attacker with the Twin Drive because you run 8 plussing triggers, so it's usually pretty valuable to attack with. And then the stock swap obviously comes up in some games, but another important function in this deck is the red fix for the Kaguya level 3.
How many red cards are you running actually? I mean, I will look at it, but I feel like it's not
I
that
think
many.
it's a 9
Okay.
total. Wait, no, it's 10, but yeah, it's not very many.
Yeah. All right, that makes sense. And you're running 1 copy of the climax swap.
Yeah. Initially, I had 2 copies of the Climax swap and 2 copies of the stock swap, but I found that red was enough, and I wanted the space somewhere else. Running 2 of this is still fine. It's like a good card with 2 good effects, so you can never be like too mad about having this card, and it's like a nice consistency option, especially because your level 3s don't dig for cards. You need like some way to better guarantee your Climax at level 3, and it's also nice at level 1, obviously.
Right. All right. So everything so far here makes sense to me. This is the part where I'm a little confused, or I think it's more interesting. So your brainstorm spread is 2 of the salvage brainstorm, 1 of the search brainstorm, and 1 of the top check 3 brainstorm. So can you explain to me your interesting spread here?
I just personally prefer splitting brainstorms when I can, when there's not like a very core function by one of them. But I think this is like a very reasonable cut to like either change this to 3 cheek or one of the check 3, or just cut like the search brainstorm altogether. I think is also reasonable. I just like having not having to search for a brainstorm specifically and just like drawing one of them and then playing around that. And the check 3 brainstorm is just to like guarantee that you have a climax at the end game, basically.
So you would say that the check 3 brainstorm is more important than the search brainstorm, but you're
Yes,
running all of
for
them
sure.
for options, right? Okay. Cool,
Yeah.
cool, very cool. That makes sense. Oh yeah, one last thing. So it looks like we're running quick maths.
22 zeros?
12.
Or
No, that's a lot, right? This is 12.
yeah, it's
Uh,
22. Yeah.
22, yeah. So is there a reason why you're indexing so high on zero count?
I mean, that's generally how I build my decks, I think. Just running very high zero counts because I value like early game and early game try fielding a lot. I think that's one of the parts where you can cheat ahead of the opponent very easily. And this set has a lot of very good level zeros that stay relevant throughout the game. Like basically none of these cards are like really dead. Even when the opponent has like full field of 1 zeros or whatever, the event lets you still use the zeros as attackers.
So moving on to level 1. Level 1's pretty light. So in addition to the 4 events, we also have 4 copies of the Chika combo. And yeah, I guess talk to me about what you like about the Chika combo. Because personally, I actually don't really like the Chika combo.
Your combo is not very good. That's just what it is, right? But the choice trigger is very good for this deck, and the Chica combo lets you opt into this whole mill package, which shores up the deck's consistency a lot, and which solves like one of the primary weaknesses I've had whenever I tested other Kaguya decks.
I guess one of the reasons why I didn't think this Chika combo was entirely linked to the event package is because the Chika combo and the event package, they don't like actually synergize together outside of just being the same color.
Oh, well, it's very hard to play the event if you're not playing Chica combo because you don't always have a Chica on board.
You don't think the brainstorm is enough for the event's condition?
It fixes like your early game consistency a lot if you have like more 1-0 targets.
Mm.
Like even if you run 4 copies of the brainstorm, which I'm not sure like any deck would really want, you don't always have the brainstorm. And then like without if you don't have like enough cards, I feel like the event starts like less becoming a fix for your consistency and actually starts like introducing more inconsistencies.
Okay, okay. I can see that.
Also, if you the I actually tried putting in the event into standby decks because like the milling thing was so annoying to me, but the standby deck has a lot of slots it wants to commit to cards that you want to standby,
Mm-hmm.
and then you don't have enough slots to actually reasonably include a number of the event and the bonder that's comfortable to use consistently.
I think it's pretty difficult. You have to cut something important, basically.
Also, color.
For sure. All right, and then the last card you run at level 1 is a 1-0 counter. It
Yeah.
seems kind of random, actually. Like, what's this 1-0 counter doing here?
First of all, it's red picks.
Oh my.
As silly as that sounds, but no. Chica attacks at 5/5, and a lot of combos, level 1 combos specifically, attack at 7k. So the counter lets it exactly beat over. So you only run 1 copy, but if your opponent sees the 1 copy, even if you don't have it in waiting room, they often sometimes just have to respect it. And if you really want it, you can just like grab it with either the drop search or the Ricky, uh, or if you have it in bin with the Chica. So it's like pretty easily accessible even at 1. Uh, and it's like it can be pretty impactful at stopping like certain cards and like keeping one of your Chicas alive. Even like the standby level 1 combo from Kage. If they don't have the 1/1 level X out, you also like hit 7k on attack. So you can even stop that.
That's pretty sick. All right, moving on to level 2s. You run 1 copy of this Kaguya. I mean, I think this is pretty straightforward, right? You're running the
Yeah.
resonance package. You can just fit one in, no problem. And one copy of the ishigami. This is the one that I'm like, it's kind of interesting. And then one copy of the refresh counter.
Yeah, so the 2-1 Kaguya is actually like if you want to change like the deck a bit more to your meta, I think this is the card that you'd want to run two of, the 2-1 Kaguya. It's like a very efficient out to level 2s and EP board. I think it's always a nice option to have. Sometimes finisher based decks, I have the problem of like falling off a bit mid game and not being able to contest with standby boards or decks that are more focused around the mid game board. And this combined with the president basically can deal with almost any board. So this is like Kaguya's own special out it has for these situations. So that's why it lets you like focus more on the top end instead of like the mid game because you already have these nice answers. 2-1 Ishigami is mainly there. I think the anti-brainstorm part is a cool ability, but it doesn't really come up that often. Your opponent won't brainstorm that often at level 3, but sometimes they do for like discard costs. But it's basically the best 2k support the set has. Because the other one is a 2-1 that when you trigger books, you turn them into doors. So that's not very useful, and it's also like off color because it's blue. And this is the only other 2k assist that costs 1 stock. And sometimes you like need the extra power for the Kaguya level 3 combo to reverse. And refresh counter is just like insurance. You have like 8 triggers that can grab it when you need it, and Kaguya level 3 is cheap enough to where you can actually resolve this and then maybe not triple Kaguya, but at least still double Kaguya.
I think any deck that runs choice gets like a free refresh counter. Basically, you make the free refresh counter cost 2 if you
If you stock
go
with the
stock,
choice,
and
or
then if you don't have it, you just get it, right? And it's just like
yeah.
a gate at that point. Yeah. All right, moving on to early place. You run 2 copies of the K and 2 copies of the Shirogane.
Yeah, I think most people also settled on uh, either running 2-2 or maybe sometimes running 3K in their standby builds. I think it's a bit annoying that both of your EPs are 2 or less, but because you have this extra mill with the 1-0 event, it's like fine to set up. Like it's very rare that you actually run into situations where you can't burn through your deck if you really want to use those EPs. Um, and I found that like this split is enough to like carry me through mid game in combination with the 2-1, especially because like usually you'll have the Chika brainstorm in back, and that can just like recycle those, and then you can reset your deck and just play them again if you get stuck at level 2 for a longer time than you expect to.
Right. So actually, for these EPs, since they're green, I noticed you're actually not running that many green in this deck. So how do you deal with that?
Oh, it's just K ends up in your clock very easily.
Oh, okay. So that means you only have 1K to work with. That's fine though.
No, I mean the runner.
Oh,
Oh, so that's actually an important part to mention. Shirogane has this experience condition. This deck is not really built around taking advantage of that. You only really try to get experience 4 if you're playing into a matchup where the clock kick on the EP is going to be very relevant. Because usually this deck tries to play into the triple Kaguya, so you don't really want to pay to drop 1 to clock kick 1. But in some matchups, like say against Sunshine or sometimes against Slime, like the clock kick becomes really valuable as like a tool of removal at level 2. And then you can try to like play for it. Then you either level the K EP healer or a Kaguya level 3. Because usually if you go for the Shirogane thing, sometimes you can still set up level 3 Kaguyas, but sometimes you like lose 1 to stock or whatever, and then you just try to do like 2 Shiroganes plus 1 Shirogane plus 2 Kaguyas instead
okay.
when you have to like set it up like that.
I see. Yeah. So you don't prioritize the experience unless you feel like you need it, basically.
Yeah, it's very like since you know as soon as you like know your matchup whether this effect is going to be important to you or not, it's like easy enough to set up that I don't really feel like I need more experience targets.
And it does help that you're running, a bunch of level ones that you can level up, so you hit
Yeah.
4 pretty easily. Yeah, cool. And then last but not least, obviously the finisher of the deck. The reason we're playing this deck is 3-2 Kaguya. I'm actually not that big of a. I don't think this card is that good at finishing, mostly because I've played it in the standby build, where, like you said, doesn't really get as much value, and it's like the standby build plays towards level 2 more. Whereas this is like definitely level 3. The way you've built this is level 3 centric.
Yeah. It's nice because since this card heals, it kind of solves like some problems where that other finisher based decks have where if they fall behind too much they they have like more trouble coming back because they can't like one tap the opponent from like a deficit. But because this is a healer, it's like a lot easier to sandbag a turn or two. And also because this card is like pretty big and heals you down, it sometimes survives a turn.
All right, I guess for cards that you have not included, there's actually one card that I was curious that you don't have here, and I was wondering what you thought about it. Why are you running the Ishigami 2K support instead of the 1/1 Kaguya level support that has the resonance with the 0/0?
So generally, this is something that has followed me for a while, ever since like the Konosuba Union Resonance engine. I don't really like the top check X engines and add. I think brainstorms are usually like apart from the first decks, brainstorms are just better for me because they first of all they're selective, and second of all they like, can like plus in multiples. And because you have the Chika engine with the event, you have enough deck speed to go into second deck like very fast, and then you can just start using brainstorms for your advantage. Like you really just don't need the resonance, and it also gives less power. But yeah, it's mostly that I think brainstorms are better than the resonance effect.
Okay, okay. I think everything else
Yeah,
makes
I'm
sense.
trying to think. I'm trying to think if I had other cards in this deck, but I think I just had different counts. So I had like 2 copies of the 2/1 Kaguya
Mm-hmm.
in the deck. I had 2 copies of the free fresh counter in the deck. I had 2 copies of the CX swap in the deck. I have 2 copies of the 1/0 counter in the deck. I tried the Ishigami runner, but like I ended up liking it less than like the other zeros.
Right, yeah, I think that makes sense. Poor Ishigami Runner. It's a good card, but I feel like a lot of decks just don't need what it provides. It's kind of
There's
weird.
already so many good zeros in the set that it's
Yeah.
like hard to justify, especially because the Ricky already has the 2K pump attached, which is like not very fair to be
Yeah,
honest. But yeah,
this Riki is just kind of crazy. It's pretty flavor though. Ishigami just gets ignored and neglected, even in the
yeah.
card game. All right, so let's talk about the game flow. So walk me through how you would play this deck from level 0 to level 3. You know, including like mulligans, like what you're doing every level, what to level, and stuff like that.
Mulligan is usually you keep K, you keep Ricky, you keep 1 copy of the Chika unless your hand is like really bad, then you just like drop all 5, and you keep the choice. Everything else you just drop, basically. You can also keep the Chika brainstorm. Yeah, that's the other one.
Do you not keep Chika level 1 combo?
You keep 1 Chika level 1 if the rest of your hand is like acceptable. If you have like either K or the Ricky or the brainstorm or a climax already, then you can keep 1 Chika. I usually don't keep more.
Okay.
And because this deck runs like so many zeros, you can like afford to drop like zeros you don't really want in your opening hand, and you can still expect to draw into some zero. So you can mulligan really aggressively, which is also what I like about decks with like very high level zero counts. Basically, the early game very much resolves around finding K runner and resolving it like as much of it as you can. So like saving cards and like trying to like plus off of the mill run effect because it just nets you like extra resources. The way the deck is set up, you can usually like force yourself to hit level 1 first because you have both the Mill Runner and the Ricky. But even if you don't, you have ways to pump Chika over thresholds to not really care about hitting level 1 second. So you can just freely be as aggressive as you want.
Are you tri-fielding level 0 with this deck?
Every time you can, you just try field. It's so easy to make back your hand with this deck because you run 8 plussing triggers and because at some point you can just spam brainstorms. So even if you end up with like 3 or 4 hand in the mid game, the brainstorms can just carry it back, and you don't really care about wasting your stock because you don't need that much for your end game.
At level 1, you're looking to resolve Chico combo as much as possible, right?
Yeah, just do 1/2 Chica combo. If you get the counter and win a lane, that's cool. If you don't get a counter, you get stuck at level 1. You usually have to like either brainstorm or you usually have to reset your deck with the event if you haven't already, and then try to like brainstorm into more copies. Or if you still have climax in the deck, just salvage it back and then go for another turn. Sometimes you don't have the climax, but the 1/0 event is like really good at helping you bridge towards your level 2 turn. In case you run out of like good cards to play out of hand. Or you can just like, if you have a second choice, you can just salvage another Chika 1/0 off your Chika combo to like use for the next turn.
Do you find yourself brainstorming every turn with this deck?
It depends on how the game goes, right? But if you don't have a good game, usually you brainstorm every turn, I think.
Okay.
Sometimes even double brainstorm back row because you don't really have a fixed back row, right? So if you don't need the drop search power pump, you just have 2 back row slots.
So at level 2, oh, and also I guess what you're leveling probably yellow going into level 1, right? Do you specifically choose a 1/0 yellow just so that you still have the option to get experience later, or do
That
you?
depends on the matchup, right?
Okay.
So usually I decide more or less at the start of the game if I want like to experience this matchup or not.
Oh.
And other than that, I just prefer leveling one of the level 0 yellows. Preferably not the brainstorm. I don't really like leveling the brainstorm because when you have like 1-1-1 of the brainstorms, it becomes a bit harder to like grab the one you really want in a situation. And I like having 4 copies of the event just to make the bonder more alive at all times. Because when you don't have any copies of the event, it's like your bonder is basically not a real card. So that's pretty annoying. So you preferably level either Ricky, Bonder, or the level 1 combo.
Okay. Yeah, and then level 2, you're leveling green, so K runner.
Level 2 usually level green. Sometimes level red and just clock green. If you just have a K runner in hand, it's also pretty common. And you don't really care that much about healing out green with the K as long as you like play the president beforehand or something.
So at level 2, how much are you trying to conserve your stock for level 3, and how much are you just trying to answer what's on your opponent's board? Like, where do you find the balance in that?
I mean, a lot of it is just matchups and experience, right? But
Hmm.
for most decks, it's like valuable to like let them keep a lane to resolve the third Kaguya, right? Third Kaguya is usually worth more than dealing with another lane. Against some decks, it's sometimes worth it to like use, especially when you decide to use the clock kick, right? That's usually the trade-off where you decide, okay, I'm not doing triple Kaguya, and instead I'm using like this, which is like fine. You're trading like 2 burns for 1 clock kick. It's not the worst, and you're usually setting your opponent behind a significant amount by doing so. Yeah, so like matchups where you would consider like Slime, Sunshine, maybe ReZero, stuff where you want a clock kick. Usually also the matchups where you try less hard for triple Kaguya. Triple Kaguya is only 7 stock, but realistically you want more stock at level 3. First of all, for the discard cost, so you can brainstorm at level 3. And second of all, if you don't have 3 Kaguya in hand, the drop search can grab the third one. Having extra stock makes it a lot easier to like go triple Kaguya. And also like extra stock for the ishigami, back row and stuff obviously is all kind of relevant.
You do still have to play pretty stock light at level 2, especially if you're brainstorming a lot and you want triple Kaguya.
Somewhat. It's not like that big of a deal because the 2-1 Kaguya doesn't really cost stock, right?
Right. That's like your one free card. But the other stuff costs, costs like, especially like Shogun. I feel like if you play Shogane, you're not triple Kaguya. Unless you triggered like a ton of choices that game.
I mean, if the game is very fast, maybe not, but usually you can play Shirogan and then still do triple Kaguya.
Oh,
It's just when you
really?
use the claw kick that it becomes like really hard. And since the K is also only 1 stock, it's it's like pretty stock light. Obviously, if you resolve the free fresh counter, for example, it's like a lot harder.
And then yeah, level 3, just play 3 Kaguyas, right? Yeah.
Well, it depends on like if you think if the opponent is in range, right? Or and it also depends on if the opponent like gives you enough targets, or if you need to like want to sandbag a turn, or if you maybe don't have enough power. Just depends on like the opponent's board setup since you are an interactive combo in a sense. But you can also like there's like basically 2 modes of sandbagging for this combo. You can like front row it, use the combo, and then try to protect it with a counter on the cross swing. Or you can like have it in the back and then push it up the next turn since it's a healer. Um, Either way works. It just depends on what you're playing against. And if you think the opponent can deal with the Kaguya with whatever you have available, be that the Ishigami or backups in hand.
I guess the 1-0 backup does come pretty handy here as well because it
Yeah,
can push Kaguya back up to
13-5 unless
13-5?
you have the Ishigami, then it's 15-5.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
that's right. Okay.
Kaguya is 11-5 base if you use combo.
If you use combo. Right. I guess we can move on and talk about some of the matchups. So I guess what matchups do you feel like is favorable for this deck, and what matchups do you feel like this deck does struggle against?
In general, I think this is like similar matchup spread to Kaguya, where honestly most decks you're like pretty good against. Especially you're good against decks that they're start slowly, that don't have like an aggressive early game, so you can just like overwhelm them and start like outspeeding them. You deal with the board every turn while pushing this like more damage than them, so it's like really hard for them to ever really stabilize. Um, and decks that don't have anything to like deal with the Kaguya level 3, since this deck can really try to set up the Kaguya level 3 by like sandbagging mid game, especially if you're ahead. You'll just like crash more mid game. Don't try to play for board as much. If you're ahead in damage, just like chip a bit and force them to like commit into a board that you can deal with Kaguya to resolve triple Kaguya and end the game. Against those decks that don't have like natural outs to Kaguya, like be that a JC or like a really big board they can use to counter over or money counter or whatever, I feel like that's generally favorable matchups because Kaguya is a very potent finisher. Not the best finisher, but like a very good finisher. Yeah, slow decks. And then decks that you actually struggle with that, for example, the standby deck won't struggle with are anti-salvage decks, which is pretty unique, but it happens sometimes. There's other aggressive decks that are finisher based, like quintuplets, that have like a similar style to you, like aggressive level 0, aggressive level 1, into an aggressive level 3, that do not have like this reverse condition that the Kaguya has, and they can maybe play around your condition while not losing any of their power at level 3. So I think those are also like somewhat harder matchups. And decks that get too big for Kaguya level 3, I guess. Like so decks that like 8 stand by Sao is probably one of the worst matchups for this deck. Unless you get like ahead early, they can usually set up a board where it's like really hard for you to get a reverse, since this deck does not run a bouncer to like remove a lot of the power from the board.
You know there is a
Hmm?
bouncer, right, in Kaguya?
Yeah, and I know there's a bouncer, but I think it's niche enough to where I don't really want to play it because it's like a deck slot that I could use, for example, for the second 2-1 Kaguya or something. And obviously like stuff like money counter and anti-burn, stuff like that is pretty annoying. So Charlotte is maybe like another more difficult one. You can use the Prez to like deal with their board somewhat, but it's still pretty annoying. But the way you win against Charlotte is just by like them not having a good early game and just pressing the advantage. But yeah, stuff like anti-burn, like Melodias is gonna come out soon, right? So that's gonna be like a really tough one for this deck to deal with. The 7 Deadly Sins card.
All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about this deck? Any last things that you feel like we might have missed?
I recommend people just like try this deck out, and because you'll find a lot of like interesting powerful lines that we didn't really cover, tied between the event, the twin drive, the CX swap, the drop search. You have like a lot of access to a lot of your zones at all times. You have a lot of deck control. So obviously we can't cover like all situations, but this deck usually will have a way to find it will have a way to fix almost any situation. Like sure, you'll sometimes like triple trigger and still die, but there's a lot of tools in this deck to for any given game state, and you can also like tech this deck to beat almost any situation that you run into, if you want to. And I think slots to cut for that would example be like consistency slots, sadly, because there's not much else to cut. So like stuff like the fourth bonder, fourth brainstorm, 1-0 counter is another one. Yeah, I think those are the main ones that you can choose to like either prep for a more field-based meta or play a bouncer for certain matchups. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Well, once again, thank you, Christian, for joining me today and sharing this really cool deck. Yeah, I'm really glad that you reached out to me and talked about this because I actually did. Well, I was actually able to play this deck a little bit afterwards and test it. It was really fun. Definitely loved the sensation of zooming through my deck at level 1 in Kaguya, which is something you normally don't have the privilege of doing. Before we close, is there any kind of shout outs, anything you want to say, closing remarks?
Well, I guess buy your English cards from Strictly Broken. If you're in US based. If you're in English based, buy them maybe from ENTCG. Support not English based, European based. Buy them from ENTCG. Support your local scene if you can. But yeah, I recommend people to like experiment with deck lists, and there's nothing bad with copying deck lists and like just using them, but don't always trust that people will find the best build automatically. Just try stuff for yourself and see if it works or doesn't work.
That's great advice. All right, thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully we'll be back with some more Kaguya lists. And again, I think Christian said it perfectly. These lists are here to give inspiration and to just really stimulate the creative energies in the community. But at the end of the day, we're providing this information so that people can try the decks out for themselves, adapt it to their playstyle, what they like to do, and yeah, just really continue to grow the game. Well, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. See ya. Bye.